Oh, McQueen. Crazy McQueen. McQueen and I got along pretty good. McQueen looked at me kind of like an old...
Oh, McQueen was crazy. McQueen and I got along pretty good. He looked at me kind of like an older brother. Those offhand words from James Garner might sound friendly, almost casual, but beneath them lived decades of unspoken tension and a story Hollywood never quite managed to tell. Garner, the silver-haired star of Maverick and the Rockford Files, had a reputation for disarming wit, gentlemanly charm, and an honesty that made fans feel they knew him personally. Yet even a man celebrated for frankness can guard a secret. And Garner carried one particular memory like a locked chest, his volatile relationship with Steve McQueen, the brooding king of cool. Their paths collided on the set of The Great Escape, a war epic that would go on to become a cornerstone of both men's filmographies. To the public, it was just another thrilling ensemble piece, but for the actors in those cramped European locations, the experience was anything but ordinary. Long after the cameras stopped rolling, whispers persisted, of clashing egos, quiet competitions, and a combustible chemistry that neither star fully admitted while alive. Now, years after Garner's passing, fragments of conversations, long-forgotten interviews, and private recollections have surfaced to reveal the truth. It's a story of two men who embodied the rugged independence of post-war Hollywood, yet found themselves locked in a battle for dominance and respect. Before we dive into those revelations, it helps to understand how James Garner became the kind of man who could stand toe-to-toe with someone as mercurial as Steve McQueen, and why their eventual confrontation was almost inevitable. James Garner wasn't just a familiar face on the television screen. He was an emblem of a particular American ideal, easygoing but unyielding, humorous yet honorable. Viewers knew him as Brett Maverick, the sly gambler who could charm anyone at the saloon table, and later as Jim Rockford, the private investigator with a wry smile and a knack for outsmarting trouble. Critics admired his ability to blend understated comedy with sharp drama. Colleagues respected his professionalism and low-key charisma. Unlike many contemporaries who relied on theatrical flourishes, Garner excelled at the art of seeming natural. He could toss out a line with such effortless timing that audiences felt like they were eavesdropping on a conversation rather than watching a performance. Off-camera, he was the kind of man who hated pretension, preferred comfortable clothes to couture, and never let Hollywood glitter blind his sense of fairness. Yet behind that relaxed demeanor was steel, a man forged in hardship long before a studio ever wrote his name on a call sheet, understanding the forces that shaped James Garner, the pain. The perseverance and the quiet acts of bravery is essential to grasping why he would later refuse to be anyone's pawn. Whether a studio executive's or a co-star's, his early life reads less like the glamorous prelude of a future celebrity and more like a gritty survival tale set against the backdrop of the Great Depression. James Scott Bumgarner entered the world on April 7, 1928, in the small town of Denver, Oklahoma, at a time when the American economy was crumbling and families across the country were tightening their belts. His parents, Weldon and Mildred, struggled like so many others. But tragedy struck early. When James was just 5 years old, his mother died during a botched abortion, a devastating loss that would leave an invisible scar on the boy's heart. Weldon owned a modest hardware store, yet after the fire that consumed it, the family's financial stability evaporated. He turned to alcohol, his grief and frustration pouring out in drink. James and his two older brothers soon found themselves in a household defined by neglect and unpredictability. Meals were never guaranteed. At times, the boys were forced to sing for their supper, punished if they refused to perform like sideshow acts. When Weldon remarried, young James's hardships deepened. His stepmother, Wilma, was by his own later accounts cruel and manipulative. Garner remembered being struck with tree branches and humiliated when she forced him to wear women's clothing as a twisted form of punishment. At 14, the simmering tension erupted. During one violent confrontation, James fought back, grappling with Wilma in a desperate bid for self-defense. The situation might have turned deadly had his father not intervened at the last moment. That night changed everything. Weldon soon abandoned the family altogether, leaving James and his brothers to fend for themselves. Resilience became less a choice than a necessity. Garner drifted through a series of odd jobs, delivering newspapers, pumping gas, even a stint in the merchant navy, which ended abruptly when chronic seasickness forced him home. For a brief, almost humorous chapter, he modeled underwear, a far cry from the rugged Hollywood hero he would become. But survival wasn't just about earning a paycheck. It was about carving a sense of identity. Garner would later credit these hard years with giving him a practical outlook and an intolerance for injustice. He had learned early that no one was coming to rescue him, a lesson that would echo throughout his life and career. The Korean War interrupted any semblance of a straight path. Drafted in 1950, James joined the U.S. Army's 5th Regimental Combat Team of the 24th Division. Just 2 days after arriving on the front lines, shrapnel from a mortar blast tore into him. Months later, friendly fire wounded him again. These injuries earned him 2 Purple Hearts, though he rarely spoke of the commendations. Garner downplayed heroism, describing himself as merely a man doing his duty. Military life left him with more than scars. During his service, he developed an intense aversion to garlic, a quirk that would oddly prove life-saving. In one instance, his unit's meal was laced, perhaps accidentally, perhaps not, with a toxic contaminant. Garner skipped it because of the garlic content. On another frigid night, while on guard duty, a faint whiff of garlic in the air alerted him to approaching enemy soldiers. His quick warning enabled his unit to ambush the would-be attackers, possibly preventing a massacre. After the war, he drifted again, working as a gas station attendant and even laying carpets alongside his father, with whom he maintained a complicated but enduring connection. Then came a chance encounter that changed everything. Paul Gregory, a perceptive talent scout, noticed Garner's striking presence and suggested acting. Initially, Garner dismissed the idea. Hollywood felt like a different universe. But fate had other plans. Years later, seeing Gregory's name on a Los Angeles agency sign, he decided to reconnect. Gregory secured him a non-speaking role in the stage production The Kane Mutiny Court-Martial, where Garner silently sat as a member of the court. Though he uttered no lines, he absorbed the mechanics of performance, studying how professionals commanded the stage. Soon came small film parts, including Sayonara opposite Marlon Brando. Each step nudged him closer to a destiny he hadn't dared to imagine. The real breakthrough arrived in 1957 when Warner Brothers cast him as Brett Maverick in the television western Maverick. Initially, industry insiders doubted the series could compete with heavyweights, like The Ed Sullivan Show. But Garner's blend of sly humor and understated heroism turned skeptics into fans almost overnight. Brett. Maverick wasn't the typical gunslinging cowboy. He preferred charm and wit to bullets and brawls. Garner's natural timing made the character irresistibly relatable, and audiences tuned in week after week to watch the gambler with a grin talk his way out of trouble. By the end of the first season, Maverick was a runaway hit, and Garner was a household name. His film career followed suit, with roles that showcased his versatility, from romantic comedies to war dramas. Yet the very qualities that made him beloved, his insistence on fairness and autonomy, would soon pit him against the powerful studio system that had elevated him. In 1960, a writer's strike brought Hollywood production schedules to a grinding halt. Maverick suddenly lacked scripts, and Warner Brothers used the pause as justification to suspend Garner's pay, claiming there was no work. At the time, he earned $250 a week, a respectable sum but far below his rising market value. Garner felt betrayed. Rather than accept the slight, he sued Warner Brothers for breach of contract, a daring move in an industry where studios often held all the cards. Hollywood insiders watched in shock as the charming television star took on one of the most powerful companies in entertainment. Garner's case was strong, and he won, setting a precedent for actors' rights and proving he was more than just the easygoing gambler he portrayed on screen. Warner Brothers attempted reconciliation, offering him a raise and a new contract, but Garner, disillusioned, declined. He compared himself to a puppet whose strings were pulled by executives and decided to chart his own course. It was a defining moment, James Garner would work on his own terms or not at all. Meanwhile, the studio scrambled to keep Maverick alive without its charismatic lead. Jack Kelly's Bart Maverick remained, but executives sought replacements who could capture Garner's unique magnetism. Robert Colbert, chosen for his resemblance to Garner, was introduced as Brent Maverick, coached to mimic his predecessor's style. Even a young Roger Moore, years before becoming James Bond, was added as Cousin Bo Maverick. Yet none could replicate the effortless charm that had made the show a phenomenon. It was around this period that Garner's path intersected most dramatically with Steve McQueen. Both men were cast in The Great Escape, a 1963 war adventure featuring a large ensemble of Hollywood's best. McQueen, already cultivating his king of cool persona, brought intensity and a competitive edge to the set. Accounts from crew members and fellow actors later painted a picture of quiet rivalry. McQueen, famously protective of his screen time, reportedly scrutinized scenes to ensure he wasn't overshadowed. Garner, confident but unpretentious, refused to play such games. Their interactions swung between camaraderie and challenge, like two alpha wolves testing boundaries. Garner once quipped that McQueen was a little crazy, yet admitted they got along pretty good, a mix of admiration and wary respect. Decades later, in interviews and memoir snippets, Garner allowed a few more candid reflections to slip. McQueen's moodiness, his need for dominance, the occasional clash of egos. Nothing escalated into open hostility, but the tension was palpable enough that cast members remembered it years afterward. This unspoken contest between two icons became part of The Great Escape's off-camera legend, a private duel hidden beneath the film's heroic camaraderie. James Garner's willingness to stand firm, whether against an overreaching studio or a scene-stealing co-star, defined his later career. He moved seamlessly between film and television, earning critical acclaim in projects like The Rockford Files and Murphy's Romance, and maintaining a reputation as one of Hollywood's most reliable leading men. When Garner passed away in 2014, tributes poured in, celebrating not only his decades of memorable roles, but also the integrity with which he navigated an often cutthroat industry. The late surfacing anecdotes about his complex rapport with Steve McQueen only added another layer to his legend. James Garner was not a man easily intimidated, even by the king of cool himself. Today, his story stands as a testament to resilience. From a childhood of poverty and abuse to the battlefields of Korea, from studio showdowns to on-set rivalries, Garner met each challenge with quiet strength and an unshakable sense of self. That combination of charm and courage is what continues to draw audiences to his work and what made his once-hidden clashes with Steve McQueen so compelling when finally revealed. James Garner's public persona often overshadowed the quiet steadiness of his private world. But those who knew him best remember a man deeply devoted to family and quietly proud of his roots. In 1956, he married Lois Clark after a whirlwind courtship of just 2 weeks, a union that surprised Hollywood but endured for nearly 6 decades until his passing. Together they raised 2 daughters, and friends frequently noted how Garner's happiest moments weren't on set but at home, grilling in the backyard or sneaking away for simple family road trips. Despite the turbulence of his childhood, Garner worked hard to give his own children stability. He rarely spoke of the abuse he endured as a boy, yet it shaped his approach to fatherhood, patient, present, and protective. He once remarked that becoming a parent gave him a second chance to create the kind of family he'd wished for as a child. Professionally, accolades arrived steadily, though he never chased them. Garner won Primetime Emmys for The Rockford Files, picked up Golden Globes for both comedy and drama, and earned an Academy Award nomination for Murphy's Romance in 1985. True to character, he downplayed the trophies, joking that awards were nice, but not the reason to show up for work. To him, acting was a craft and a job, something to be done well and with integrity, not a pedestal from which to demand worship. His influence on modern television and film is subtle but profound. Characters like Jim Rockford paved the way for today's morally complex TV anti-heroes, blending charm, vulnerability, and quiet intelligence. The dry wit and naturalistic style that once set him apart now feels standard in prestige dramas and smart comedies. Younger actors often cite Garner as proof that charisma need not come with ego, and that understatement can be more magnetic than grand gestures. Even years after his death, his work continues to resonate. Streaming platforms have introduced Maverick and the Rockford Files to new generations. While film historians often credit him with bridging the gap between the old studio system and the freer, more character-driven cinema of the late 20th century. When fans revisit his performances today, whether it's the sly grin of Brett Maverick, the weary determination of Jim Rockford, or the quiet strength he brought to The Great Escape, they're reminded that James Garner's greatest legacy isn't just the roles he played. It's the rare blend of authenticity, resilience, and quiet decency he brought to every aspect of his life, on screen and off. As the years passed, James Garner remained as active as ever, but the physical demands of decades in Hollywood began to take their toll. Unlike many stars who used stunt doubles, Garner had a stubborn streak of independence. He prided himself on doing much of his own action work, from fistfights in Maverick to car chases in the Rockford Files. That dedication thrilled audiences but left his body battered. By the late 1970s and 1980s, chronic knee pain and back issues forced him into multiple surgeries. Still, Garner refused to complain publicly. On set, he carried himself with quiet humor, joking about his aches instead of wallowing in them. Co-stars often recalled how he would finish a grueling sequence, retreat to a corner to ice his knees, and then return with a grin as if nothing had happened. Pain was constant, but quitting was never an option. Health challenges escalated in the 1980s and 1990s. Garner underwent quintuple bypass heart surgery in 1988, a terrifying ordeal that might have ended a lesser man's career. Yet within a year, he was back on screen, proving his resilience once more. He continued working steadily into the 2000s, appearing in beloved projects like Space Cowboys and The Notebook, which introduced him to yet another generation of fans. Behind the scenes, Garner became outspoken about healthcare and veterans' issues, often connecting his personal struggles to larger causes. Having endured the harsh realities of war and the long-term consequences of physical labor, he advocated for better medical treatment for veterans and fairer protections for working actors. He saw his own hardships as part of a bigger fight, and in true Garner fashion, he never shied away from standing up for what he believed was right. Friends say that even as age slowed him down, his sense of humor never dimmed. Whether it was poking fun at his own heart surgery scars or cracking a wry joke at industry events, Garner remained the same unpretentious man audiences had fallen in love with decades earlier. When James Garner passed away in July 2014 at the age of 86, tributes poured in from every corner of the entertainment world. Actors, directors, and fans alike spoke not only of his performances, but also of his humanity. Tom Selleck, who followed Garner in the tradition of TV detectives, praised him as the most natural actor I've ever seen. Sally Field remembered him as a man of decency and kindness in an industry that often forgets both. For fans, the news felt like losing a trusted friend. Garner's characters had always carried a sense of accessibility. He seemed like someone you could run into at a diner, ready to share a laugh and a cup of coffee. That relatability explains why the Rockford Files reruns still draw loyal viewers, and why Maverick remains a template for clever, unconventional heroes. Today, film schools often cite Garner as an example of minimalism done right. In a world where young actors are taught to project, Garner proved that pulling back could be just as powerful. A raised eyebrow, a crooked smile, or a weary sigh carried more weight than a shouted monologue. His influence is visible in countless modern performances, from TV detectives who balance humor with grit to movie stars who favor subtlety over spectacle. Beyond technique, his life story continues to inspire. The boy who lost his mother, endured abuse, survived a war, and defied the studio system rose to become one of Hollywood's most enduring stars. He never let bitterness define him. Instead, he built a career and a legacy on resilience, fairness, and honesty. Memorials and retrospectives after his death highlighted this duality. James Garner, the matinee idol who never acted like one. His star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame remains a modest reminder, but his true legacy lives in the millions of viewers who still find comfort, laughter, and inspiration in his work. As time passes, Garner's story grows not smaller but larger, expanding with every generation that discovers his films. He wasn't just an actor. He was proof that decency and strength can coexist in a single life, and that sometimes the quietest heroes leave the loudest echoes. James Garner's career offers a window into Hollywood's own evolution. He entered the industry when the old studio system still exerted near-total control, a time when long-term contracts bound actors to one employer and personal lives were micromanaged for publicity. By the time he retired, the landscape had transformed into an era of independent productions, creative freedom, and star-driven projects. Garner didn't just live through this transition. He helped shape it. His legal battle with Warner Brothers in the early 1960s remains a pivotal case in entertainment law. By successfully challenging the studio's attempt to suspend his pay during the writers' strike, Garner set a precedent that empowered actors to fight unfair contracts. Entertainment unions frequently cite his lawsuit as a key moment in modernizing labor practices. For young performers today, the ability to negotiate flexible deals and maintain control over their image owes something to the quiet determination of James Garner. Garner's insistence on authenticity also foreshadowed the character-driven films of the 1970s. While many stars clung to glamorous personas, he favored roles that reflected ordinary people, relatable men with everyday problems, wry humor, and a moral compass. This approach anticipated the gritty realism of the new Hollywood era. When directors like Robert Altman and Hal Ashby sought the very naturalism Garner had been embodying for years, the actor's influence extended behind the camera as well. He championed better working conditions on set and fair treatment for crews, often using his own salary to ensure safety measures or to support fellow actors in disputes. Colleagues remember that if Garner saw an electrician or stunt performer being overlooked, he quietly but firmly intervened. That combination of humility and resolve helped nurture a more collaborative environment on his productions. Even in the age of big-budget franchises and digital spectacle, Garner's philosophy remains strikingly modern. He believed audiences could sense honesty and gravitated toward performers who didn't act so much as be. Many contemporary stars, from George Clooney to Bryan Cranston, have acknowledged Garner's example when discussing the balance between charm, craft, and authenticity. In this way, James Garner is more than a beloved entertainer of the past. He stands as a bridge between two eras of filmmaking, proof that integrity and longevity can thrive amid the shifting tides of Hollywood. James Garner often said he never considered himself a movie star, but rather an actor lucky enough to keep working. Ironically, that humility is exactly what cemented his lifelong bond with audiences. Fans felt they knew him, not just the characters he played, but the man behind the camera. Garner rarely courted tabloids or engaged in publicity stunts. Instead, he maintained a down-to-earth presence, answering fan letters personally when possible and stopping for conversations on the street. Viewers who met him recount that he treated them like old friends, a habit formed in his Oklahoma upbringing where a handshake and a smile still meant something. This easy warmth translated onto the screen. Whether he played a poker-faced gambler or a hard-bitten private eye, audiences sensed the genuine decency beneath the performance. Television historians often note that The Rockford Files was ahead of its time in depicting an everyman hero who occasionally failed, got conned, or admitted fear, traits rarely given to leading men of the 1970s. Garner's willingness to portray vulnerability made Jim Rockford relatable to millions and paved the way for modern, character-driven detective shows like Columbo, Monk, and Better Call Saul. In interviews, actors from those series frequently cite Garner's nuanced performance as inspiration. The fan connection endured well beyond his active career. Reruns of Maverick and Rockford continue to find new audiences on streaming platforms, sparking online communities devoted to sharing rare interviews, behind-the-scenes stories, and personal encounters. When Garner passed away in 2014, memorials poured in from every corner of the entertainment world, and from ordinary viewers who felt they had lost a trusted companion. Social media lit up with anecdotes of kindness, a quiet donation to a children's hospital here, a friendly conversation at a gas station there. It's telling that many tributes described him not as a star, but as one of us. James Garner had achieved what few in Hollywood manage. He remained both legendary and approachable, embodying the idea that true greatness requires no ego. Garner's journey offers a blueprint for resilience. From a painful childhood to battlefield injuries and bruising studio fights, he faced challenges that might have hardened another man. Instead, they gave him perspective. "I got lucky," he once said, "but I also kept moving forward." His story reminds aspiring artists and anyone chasing a dream that perseverance matters as much as talent. He entered acting almost by accident with no formal training, yet he built a 6-decade career by staying curious and adaptable. Garner never stopped learning. Each role, whether comedic or dramatic, became an opportunity to refine his craft. Equally instructive was his moral compass. He refused to compromise on fairness, whether defending crew members, challenging a major studio, or advocating for veterans. Friends recall that he disliked hypocrisy more than failure. He believed a quiet truth outweighed loud success. For audiences today, Garner's life underscores the enduring value of authenticity. In an era of carefully curated celebrity images, his example stands out. He showed that kindness and integrity are not obstacles to stardom, they are the foundation of a legacy that lasts.